Hello there, I'm Ben Bowers, the Spirit Specialist, and this is the drink-along accompanying video to the Battle of Barrel Proof Barrel Strength, Cask Strength American Whiskey Selection Pack that I've put together. I was struggling to think of a name for the pack. The Battle of Barrel Proof sounded a bit like some battle in the Civil War. It was as good as I could do. So this particular sample pack features 6 samples of American whiskies, not necessarily bourbon, that are bottled at what in European terms would be cask strength, but barrel proof, barrel strength sounds a bit more impressive, a bit more American, so it kind of suits that particular category of whiskies. 4 of these are available in the UK. 2 of them are not. 2 of them are ones that I've actually bought across myself. We're going to finish with those. Now, normally when I do a tasting, we tend to kind of run from lightest to heaviest or smokiest or anything like that. Difficult when it's barrel strength American whiskies, because the flavor profile of American whiskies generally is not too drastic. It's not like you can go from a light lowland to a heavily peated Islay or anything like that. So I've kind of split this into not actually the order that's on the front of the box. That was more aesthetically because it was going from low to high. It looks a little bit better on the label, but with this, I've kind of split it into 3 well-known barrel-proof brands, and then the last 3 are the ones that are more unusual, which includes the 2 that aren't available to the UK. So although the picture has it Blanton's 4 Roses, Old Elk, Booker's, Rye 3, and then the Jaywalk Rye from New York Distilling, the order inside the box is a little bit different. So we're going to look at the 4 Roses, the Blantons, the Bookers, and then we'll move to slightly more unusual, say. So we've got the Jaywalk Rye, we've got the Old Elk, which is a tawny port finish, and then the Rye 3, the 16-year-old light whiskey. And light whiskey is something quite unusual that quite a lot of people, even American whiskey fans, don't really know what it is. Now, like beer, we kind of do know what it is, and light beer and light whiskey are very different things. So what I've done is I've put together, as I do with most of my tasting reviews, some background information about each particular bottling that's here. Give you a bit of information about the distillery, about the people that founded it, the mash bill. Ideally, in some cases, it's quite hard to know what the mash bill is, and just the parts about the actual bottling itself. I'll give you, in between those, I'll give you just a brief overview in terms of like my thoughts on it, but I'm not going to do like a full tasting on it, and I'm not necessarily going to kind of go in deep because my thoughts could be completely different to yours. But you know, it just kind of breaks up these background information ones that I've edited together. So if you want to drink this in the order of what's in the box, that's absolutely fine. If you want to dip in and dip out, so on the show notes, I will put the breakdown the various times when we go sample by sample. So if you're one night on your own, or you just fancy just one of them and you just want the information while you're drinking it, you can jump straight to that particular sample that you've got. And obviously I would say that if you are planning to do this like in a night, be aware these are higher proof whiskies. Responsible drinking is essential. They do have lids on, so you don't have to drink all the sample in one go. And I kind of recommend actually maybe having a taste of each one individually, but then saving some and maybe going back, if you are doing all 6, as we tend to do in tasting events, is maybe go back to the first or the second to see if your opinions might have changed, having had a few more, not because you've got more alcohol in your system, but because you've got them some more context and some more different flavors, and your taste buds are a bit more kind of active, to be able to go back to the first and the second, which might have come across a little bit hot maybe, or a little bit flat, and you go back and you go, oh, actually it's got a lot more going for it. And if you want to add water to them, that's absolutely fine. They haven't added water, so if you want to, not a problem at all. I'm not going to judge it. You can mix it if you want. I really don't care. It's your pack, you've paid for it, you drink it however you want it. Far be it from me to tell you how to drink anything, because that's incredibly inconsiderate of me. So, let's look at the first one. So, the first one that we have in the pack is the 4 Roses. Now, obviously, these are empty bottles because I have decanted these into the sample packs. The reason that I don't have full bottles to show is all of these, I've got very, very few in the first place. In some cases, literally 1. So the Four Roses, the barrel strength. So as you'll find out, this is an annual release that comes out. So this is the 2024 edition. I'm filming this in March of 2025. They tend to come out in fall, autumn, for you British lot out there. So we obviously haven't got the 2025 yet, but I've been fortunate enough to do a tasting with the 21, 22, 23, along with the other small batch selection, which I did last year, which was a tasting chocolate pairing with Chris Corcoran of Treat. So we did 5 samples. We did the small batch select, and then 21, 22, 23 barrel strength limited editions. And then when I got my hands on the 24, I thought it was really good last time. Let's do the same again, but let's do the full core range along with the 24. So it was for Valentine's Day, in fact. So Chris did chocolate pairings again, but this time we had the original, the small batch, the single barrel, the small batch select, and then the 2024, and his chocolates paired absolutely perfectly. So if you're interested in doing anything like that, any sort of online tasting events, or if you're able to make it in person, I am ongoing, I'm gonna try and do more this year in terms of tasting events, things like that. So I was fortunate enough to try this, and I kept one of these aside. I did not get many bottles of this at all. But I kept one aside deliberately with a view of doing this particular pack, because this is very, very popular and on the pricey side, and not everybody can get their hands on it. So to give more people an opportunity to try it is very much what I'm about. So let me give you some background information about not just the 2024 limited edition, but also the history of the Four Roses distillery.
One of the oldest bourbon brands around, the Four Roses brand dates back to a trademarking in 1888, although it has been said a whisky of that name was sold from before the 1860s. An early legend has the brand named after Rufus Mathewson Rose, a Georgia liquor wholesaler and distiller who moved to Tennessee with his brother Oregon and their 2 sons, hence Four Roses. However, much more reputable sources have Paul Jones Jr. as the actual founder, and given that the Four Roses name was trademarked 10 years before the Mathewson Rose family moved to the state, it's safe to say that this is much more likely the truth. The official story behind the brand name states that when Jones Jr. became smitten by the beauty of a Southern belle, he sent a marriage proposal to her, to which she replied that if her answer was to be yes, she would wear a corsage of roses on her gown to an upcoming grand ball. Paul Jones Jr. waited for her answer excitedly on the night of the ball, and when she arrived in her beautiful gown, she also wore a corsage of 4 red roses. He named his bourbon whiskey Four Roses as a symbol of his devout passion for the lovely belle, a passion he would transfer to making his beloved whiskey. Regardless of the legends, a distillery was built in 1910 in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky to produce Four Roses, although it was originally named the Old Prentice Distillery. It's a stunning building in Spanish Mission-style architecture, and the distillery is listed on the US National Register of Historic Places. Purchased by Canadian drinks giant Seagram in 1943, for nearly 40 years Four Roses wasn't actually available as a straight bourbon, instead being a brand name for blended whiskies, until it was eventually relaunched in 1994. After being taken over by the Japanese Kirin Brewing Company in 2002, Four Roses as a brand was refocused into a range of straight bourbon whiskies. Brent Elliott has been master distiller since August 2015, after spending the previous 10 years under the tutelage of legendary distillery manager Jim Rutledge. Four Roses make a big deal about their somewhat unusual whiskey making operation. 5 different types of proprietary yeast are used, labelled V, K, O, Q and F, that individually provide distinct flavour profiles. These are used in conjunction with 2 different combinations of mash bill. Mash bill B is dubbed high rye, with 60% corn, 35% rye and 5% barley, whereas mash bill E is low rye, with 75% corn, 20% rye and 5% barley. The mathematicians amongst you will figure out this gives Four Roses a 10 recipe process that can be utilised for all bottlings within their portfolio. Whereas the entry-level original is a marriage of all 10 recipes, the likes of the small batch only uses 4 of them. A sequence of letters denote the 10 recipe types. O is always present, representing the Old Prentice distillery name, and likewise S, denoting a straight whiskey, with the designations of mash bill and yeast type filling in the blanks. Since 2008, a limited barrel strength bottling of Four Roses small batch has been released every autumn, showcasing the very best that the distillery can offer, with Brent sampling and blending nearly 200 casks to produce an annual masterpiece. In the case of the latest 2024 edition presented in this pack, the following combination of whiskies was used: 31% OBSV, making delicate fruit and rye, barrels of 12 years old. 23% OESK, offering baking spice, barrels at 15 years old. 39% OESF, producing light grain and mint flavours, barrels that were 16 years old. And 7% OBSV, that delicate fruit and rye again, barrels that were 20 years old. It was bottled at 54.1% ABV or 108.2 US proof.
So, you might have tried this while you were watching that background information. This went down really, really well. And to be honest, Four Roses is one of my go-to distilleries because of that 10 recipe process, because of the fact that they can do in their portfolio a selection of bottlings that kind of maintain a core house style, but go in slightly different directions. And it's almost like from the original upwards, it's good, better, better, even better, best. They're just fantastic. The original's brilliant as an entry level, 25, 30 quid. Use it in old fashions, drinks really well, neat. The small batch, the standard small batch, I think is incredibly approachable and very much a bourbon that I use as an introduction to what bourbon can offer. They also do this rather nifty pack, which has got 2 ice molds in it. The single barrel is my old-fashioned bourbon of choice, and it's stunning in a Manhattan as well. The small batch select almost does itself a disservice by being in this small batch branding. I think a lot of people associate it with the small batch and go, oh, well, it's just like a slightly higher strength. Different recipe combination, absolutely incredible. And to be honest, value for money wise, compared to maybe some of these bottlings, or certainly the way the American whiskey market's going, the top end line, you know, the sort of 90, 100, 150 quid bottlings of what I would say is a regular bourbon release. The small batch select for around 65, 70 is incredible value for money. It's absolutely amazing. And then this 24 went down a storm at the tasting. A lot of honey notes coming through on that. And even with this higher ABV, it still drinks really well neat. There is heat from there, but it's not overpowering, and there's a lot of other flavourings going on. We've got some really old stock in here, and that is absolutely evident in the complexity, but also adding to the finish. Honey was overriding, but there's a lot of vanilla coming through there. The chili spice is not overpowering as it might be with the higher ABV. Lots of complexity going through. It really is just like Four Roses, just keep knocking it out of the park. I'm hopeful that their single barrel sort of individual recipe bottlings that have just come out in the States are going to be available to the UK. We're kind of working on that. And following the success of the last tasting I did, which was with Ilaria, who's the Four Roses brand ambassador, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we can actually do a tasting which will be the 10 individual recipes. Now that will obviously be quite a meaty tasting. That is a lot of liquid going down people's throats. So we're going to have to figure out how to do this in a somewhat responsible way, but be able to do all 10 to do a comparison between those individual recipes. Really, really looking forward to that. So keep fingers crossed and keep an eye out. But just in terms of this, I love Four Roses. You know, I probably have already a preconceived bias towards it, but again, it's absolutely fantastic. And is it the pinnacle? I do think the small batch select, I think just because of the price point and the quality of it, I think the small batch select is my personal favorite out of all of them so far. But I am factoring in that retail price level as well. But they're all brilliant, and I love them, and I love everything that they're doing. Right, so let's have a look at the next one. So, Blanton's. Now, prior to opening the shop, I used to work for a company called Gordon MacPhail, and Gordon MacPhail are the UK distributors for Blanton's. They've been doing it for a while. They used to distribute other brands as well, but because of some changes in the business, they got rid of what we call the third-party lines. Used to distribute Paul John, things like that. Blanton's is the one that they've kept. And Blanton's, as a sales manager for the north of England, Blanton's, and if anybody's watching that used to work at G&M, will know that Blanton's was a bit of a pain in the arse because everybody wants it. Everybody wants it as much as they can get their hands on. So we used to get allocations. It used to come across on the boat, we'd get an allocation. It wasn't a lot. Basically, the ship went across to mainland Europe, it would get emptied in France, and then we would have not a lot coming back into the UK as it made its way back to America. So it was a case of, hey Ben, for the north of England, you've got 6 bottles of Blanton's Gold to allocate to your 50 customers, all who want a pallet each. It was just a nightmare. It's got better. Recently, in recent years, we have been getting bigger allocations. The popularity of Blanton's meant the price has gone up and up and up, but it's not often that we get a straight from the barrel release. There are straight from the barrel releases as like exclusive bottlings. La Maison de Whiskey do quite a few, and then they tend to kind of bring it into the UK via a very big retailer, even though they shouldn't. The price is bouncing around all over the place. The original, which is the core bottling, used to be about 50 quid, say 10 years ago. It's gone up and up and up and up, and it's got to the point now where the retail for the original should be 80 quid, say. Should be 75, 80 ideally. There are places selling it for 150 and the gold at 200, 250. It's just insane. It should be based on, we've just had some price changes come through, the retail right now based on the price from the distributor, as in my old employer, and if you put a standard margin on, it should be 75, 80 quid for the original, about 100, 105, 110 maybe for the gold. It depends on people's margins. And then the straight from the barrel was coming in at about 150. But some places are just banging another 100 quid on top of that. And it's selling because it's in such high demand. And as you find out, there is a reason why it's in such high demand, but also the prices are being pushed up because there's not that much available, and there never will be for good reason. We actually had a conversation during a whiskey show at one point where we said to them, can you get us more? Can we have more? Because we never get enough. And they went, no. And if you want to control the supply of it, sorry, the demand of it, if you want to control that demand, the one thing that you can do is put the price up. Capitalism, yay. Anyway, Blanton's, highly distinctive. Everybody wants the stoppers. There's a really good story on the stoppers. This is N, not N apostrophe. If you're wondering what that's about, carry on watching. So one of my all-timers, one of the first bourbons I ever got, and kind of got me into bourbon. I didn't get many of this. Again, there wasn't many available to retailers. And again, I've seen this for stupid prices. But before I give you my little insight into what I think of this, let me give you the background information about Blanton's bourbon, who Blanton was, and the makeup behind the bottlings.
Named after Albert B. Blanton, and believe it or not, the B stands for bacon, the Blanton's branding was created by Buffalo Trace master distiller Elmer T. Lee in 1984, who had previously worked under Blanton himself as an apprentice. Blanton was hired as an office boy for the George T. Stagg distillery in Frankfort, Kentucky in 1897 at the tender age of 16, and worked his way up to the position of company president by 1921, eventually overseeing the expansion from an initial 14 buildings to a state-of-the-art operation with 114 buildings by his retirement in 1952. When dignitaries and important folk visited the distillery, Blanton would treat them to special samples from selected casks resting in Warehouse H. This is the only all-metal warehouse in the distillery complex, which experiences the greatest fluctuations in temperature as a result, and causing the barrels within to have greater interaction between spirit and wood. In honour of his first boss, Elmer T. Lee kept on this tradition, and at the launch of Blanton's, the brand claimed to be the first single-barrel bourbon, as individual casks from the centre of Warehouse H are bottled one at a time, as opposed to being married in batches. 6 people from a team of 12 taste every single barrel selected, and only if all 6 agree it makes the standard required will it then be bottled, ensuring a consistency of quality, even if there are very slight differences between each barrel. This also accounts for the relatively limited amount of stock that is available worldwide, as the brand owners are not prepared to sacrifice quality control just to get more bottles onto shelves. Buffalo Trace uses 4 different mash bill recipes for their various releases, and although the exact proportions within these mash bills are not officially divulged, Blanton's uses mash bill 2, a high rye mash with around 12 to 15% rye. Although Blanton's is produced at the Buffalo Trace distillery, the brand name and distribution is owned by Age International, who owned the distillery from 1983 until it was sold to Sazerac in 1992. This is why you won't find Blanton's as part of Sazerac's BTAC collection, despite the fact they very much would like it to be. Blanton's has become one of the most sought-after bourbon brands in the world due to the iconic bottle shape, the stopper, and the consistency of the quality of the liquid inside. The original is bottled at 46.5% ABV, or 93 US proof, whereas the Gold Edition is bottled at 51.5% ABV, or 103 proof. That's the only difference, but that extra ABV really does make a hell of a difference. The straight from the barrel releases, which appear on occasion, are exactly as they say. Some of the best barrels the quality control team come across that are dumped straight from the cask into bottle without any dilution. A note on the stoppers. Introduced in 1999, there are 8 of them, each modelling various stages of a horse race, a sport synonymous with Kentucky. From approaching the start line, setting off, racing to the finish, and finally, the rider raising a fist in victory. The reason that there are 8 stoppers? There's a letter stamped at the base of each stopper. B-L-A-N-T-O-N with an easier to see colon as opposed to an apostrophe, and S. Every bottle of Blanton's is hand labelled and sealed, and the stoppers are randomly placed on. So you could buy 8 bottles and get a different stopper on each one, or 8 of the same letter. Such is life. The bottling featured in this sample pack was dumped on 6th of March 2024 from barrel number 429 with an ABV of 63.35% or 126.7 US proof.
Okay, so Blanton's for me is probably erring on that sweeter side of bourbon. That corn really comes through. I love the sweetness of it. I think it's why it goes down really well with drinkers, because not only does it look really cool, it's also sweet, approachable to almost anyone. Maybe too sweet for some people, that's understandable. It's so distinctive. John Wick, this is like John Wick's bourbon of choice. You'll see it through the John Wick movies. And I've just watched a program called Paradise on Disney Plus, which I highly recommend. Really good kind of like mystery box show. And one particular episode, the 7th episode of the 8 in that particular series, is one of the most intense, harrowing, compulsive episodes of television I have seen in years. They have Blanton's pouring throughout Paradise like it is tap water. It is insane. And I was very jealous watching it. Anyway, in terms of the whiskey itself, I love the sweetness that's come through, again, at a really high strength. So whereas the Four Roses was 54.1, this is 63.35 and still drinks really well neat. It really feels like it doesn't necessarily need water, and if it does, not a huge amount. Like I say, on the sweeter side, but I think I like the sweeter sides, and if you like the sweeter side of bourbon, once we start getting into the later ones, you're going to be probably a bit happier. But just so approachable, it looks cool. You've got the option of collecting the stoppers, that sort of thing. But the liquid itself is just consistently brilliant all the way through. Bags of complexity. Some people might want a bit more spice on, and I get that, I understand that. But if you've got a little bit of a sweet tooth, this is absolutely going to do it for you. Okay, so let's move on to the next. So, Booker's Bourbon, and this is potentially going to be the most divisive of the box if I were to do, say, a tasting event. Booker's is, to be perfectly honest, a bourbon that I've really struggled with. It's a bit of a halo bourbon. I don't know if it still is, but it was always packaged in like a wooden box with a clear plastic frontage so you could see the bottle inside. But it looked super premium, and the price point, again, is one where, bit like Blanton's, it used to be say 50-60 quid, and now it's kind of pushing 100. It's really getting a bit steep. But this is one of the spiciest bourbons that I've ever come across, and American whiskies in general. And it is too hot for some people. It's bordering on too hot for me. It's just that intensity of spice, pepper, chili flakes that come through is just a little bit, for me personally, I have struggled with it from time to time. But other people absolutely love that. And there is a bit of a terminology in the trade and the consumer market for American whiskies in terms of barrel-proof whiskies, barrel-strength whiskies, are also known as hazmat whiskies, as in hazardous material. And this epitomizes hazmat as a term in terms of it's barrel strength, but it's full on, it punches you in the face, it's got loads of spice going on, and it is that definition of hazmat as for a non-whiskey drinker, or even a kind of person that prefers the sweeter side, so for example the Blantons, This is like, Jesus Christ, what is going on here? It's really, really intense. But for some people it's not even intense enough. But for others, that is what they want from their American whiskies. So, let me tell you about Booker's in terms of who was Booker. Is it named after anybody? The distillery behind this, that is very well known if you weren't aware what distillery this is made at. And the quite long familial history that is involved in the production of what then ends up being this.
In 1792, Jacob Behm, a German immigrant who anglicised his original name of Johann Böhm, began to produce a corn whisky using the sour mash fermentation process, in which an older batch of match begins the fermentation process of the next, selling bottles under the name of Old Tub. He handed the distillery operations over to his son David Behm in 1820, and 30 years later his son, David M. Behm, would be the third master distiller. David M. took advantage of the growth of railroad lines to improve distribution and moved operations to a new distillery in Nelson County, Kentucky in 1854. David M.'s third son, James Beauregard Behm, took over the distillery operation in 1894, but was forced to fully close the business in 1920 as a result of Prohibition. Once it was repealed in 1933, he opened a brand new distillery in Clermont, and in 1935 launched Colonel James B. Behm Bourbon, as the naming rights for Old Tub had been lost. His son, T. Jeremiah, would then take over the reins in 1946, and rename the brand Jim Beam in honour of his father's work. As T. Jeremiah had no children, he brought his nephew, Frederick Booker No II, and grandson of Jim Beam, on board as master distiller in 1960. Similar to what Albert Blanton did at what would become the Buffalo Trace Distillery, Booker would often select special casks to be bottled at Cask Strength for friends and family, and in 1987 the first launch of Booker's Uncut Small Batch Bourbon was released to the public. For nearly 40 years, Booker No led the Jim Beam brand before handing over the reins to the only non-family member to be a master distiller for the company, Jerry Dalton, who bridged distilling operations between 1998 and 2007 until Fred Booker No III took over, becoming the seventh generation of the family to head distilling. In 2014, Beam Incorporated, the parent company of the distillery, was purchased by Suntory Holdings to become part of a drinks behemoth that would include brands such as Macallan and Highland Park as part of Edrington Beam Suntory. And despite being part of such a massive business empire, Jim Beam would continue its family ties by announcing Freddie No as the 8th generation master distiller in May 2022, working in conjunction with his father. Booker's Bourbon is released in batches, with details given on the front label and on the Booker's website. However, the batch used for this sample pack is 2024-01E. The E denotes a release for the export market, so this isn't the same as the 2024-01 Springfield release that's shown on the Booker's website. The mash bill isn't officially disclosed, but there are reports of a proportion of 75% corn, 13% rye and 12% barley. And while information for the US release does indicate from what warehouse barrels were sourced from, this export version isn't as clear. The label does show a specific age of 7 years, 1 month and 12 days, and it has an ABV of 62.2% or 124.4 US proof.
So, there is intensity in here. And I don't know whether the flavour profiles are changing over time, whether they've eased back, because it's not as full on as I remember it, but it is still full on. There's coffee notes and there's like salted caramel and there's all sorts of stuff going on. It used to be, maybe it's just the way I'm remembering it, maybe they have kind of slightly tweaked the flavour profile to make it a little bit more approachable. But there's less punchy black pepper, chili flakes, dried chili flakes, intensity, and more kind of fruitiness coming through. It's still a high ABV. Obviously, we have this complication now between if you go onto the Booker's website and look at the code, this is not the same whiskey as what they're doing. The ones in America have, the batches are named. So there was, this particular one was Springfield for the US version. But the export one, I don't know if it's just because they can't be bothered, you know, it's extra work to do the details for the export ones, whether I've completely missed the website somewhere where it just talks about those ones. But it's really hard to find specific information about these, whereas the American ones, they'll tell you where in the warehouse it came from. So it's one of them. The other thing I don't know is how big this batch is. You know, the straight from the barrel is a single barrel. The Four Roses is anywhere up to 200 barrels. So, you know, there's quite a lot available. I don't really know how big the batches are. I've read anything from like 5 to 10 barrels to nearly 100, so I just don't know. Now, these do come out quite often, so there is a lot of stock going into this, but as a sort of a halo bottling for Jim Beam, and it's interesting because Jim Beam, standard Jim Beam, they've got loads and loads of flavoured Jim Beams now. If you've done the Some Like It Hot Box, which has got the Jim Beam fire in there, very, very disappointing. Standard Jim Beam and their flavoured are very much like pitched at the bottom shelf, low end, cheap and cheerful type thing. And yet, right at the other end, we've got stuff like this, which is big and bold and punchy and exclusive and premium and all this lot. They really are straddling all those camps. They've got the history to be able to do that, but it's very interesting to see where they're taking the core Jim Beam and where they're pitching that now to a consumer market, and yet still having this kind of, you know, halo collectible, oh, that you've got to collect all of these ones right at the top end as well. Is it too much for me? No, not anymore. But is that because my tastes have changed or because the flavour profile of this is just easing off a bit? Okay, so let's look at the next. So this is where we're starting to move into slightly more unusual territory. We've done some arguably big names here. We've done Four Roses, we've done Blantons, we've done Jim Beam in essence. This is where we start to move a little bit off track, a little bit left field. And this is another one where I had a sample of this and I thought, oh, this is really good. And for the price point, compared to other, particularly bourbons, at a similar or higher price point, this has got way more going on for it. I think because it doesn't say the word bourbon on it, it means that they can't really push that price point much higher. Good story behind this, a lot of history behind this, mainly in the main ingredient. It's the rye. This is where the history comes from. But New York Distilling have done some very interesting things. When they first came out, they had a number of gins, and then they had the ragtime rye. And to be honest, the ragtime rye, the standard ragtime ryes were okay. They weren't bad. They were okay. They did an interesting thing called Rock and Rye, which was based on an old cocktail. So it was rye whiskey mixed with, I think it was like rock sugar and cherry juice and something like that. And it was a bit weird, but it was interesting and it was kind of different. And again, it had that historical context. The gins were, yeah, they were okay. And then this comes out and this absolutely blows my socks off. So before I tell you what I thought of it and why it blew my socks off, here's the a bit briefer, to be honest, background information on New York Distilling Company, and then also Jaywalk Heirloom Rye, and why the heirloom bit is quite important.
Distilling in New York dates back to the late 1600s, and during Prohibition there were apparently over 55,000 illicit stills operating in the city. But it wasn't until 2010 that Kings County opened as the first legal distilling operation in New York for nearly 100 years. The following year, on the 78th anniversary of Prohibition's repeal, the New York Distilling Company was founded by Alan Katz, one of the nation's leading experts in spirits and mixology, and Tom Potter, co-founder of the Brooklyn Brewery. Rye was the prevalent grain used in whiskey making in the northeast of America, and the aim of the business was to revive this style of whiskey that had been usurped in popularity by sweeter corn-heavy spirits. Whereas their core ragtime rye range of whiskies uses rye sourced from farms in the local area, the single-barrel Jaywalk release uses an heirloom rye named Horton. Heirloom rye refers to older traditional varieties of rye that date back to the early 20th century or even the 1800s and are often grown for their unique characteristics and flavour profiles. Horton hadn't been grown commercially for over 200 years, but Alan and Tom spent 13 years working with a seed bank and a local farmer to eventually produce an annual harvest of 200 acres that is used to make small batches of whiskey bottled one barrel at a time. 75% of the mash bill uses Horton rye, with 13% corn and 12% malted barley, before 7 years aging in virgin oak barrels with a medium char. In the case of the sample in this pack, distillation took place on the 26th of January 2016 before bottling on the 4th of August 2023 with a barrel strength of 57.7% ABV or 115.4 US proof.
Okay, I realised I've said heirloom and it should be heirloom, but this, so rye whiskies I used to struggle with, and I think it was because the ryes that I was having were, rye can be really spicy or really fruity or really quite subtle. Rye is a very, very versatile grain that is producing some really, really interesting whiskies, not just in America either. These up here, Staright from Denmark, their rye whiskies were absolutely incredible, and I'm almost thinking rye is now potentially my favourite grain. So I've always been, when I've, until relatively recently, when a rye's come out, I've been a little bit unsure, but I got a sample of this from the UK distributor, and it just blew me away. The fruitiness that was in there, this kind of like raisins and sultanas and a touch of almond and prunes, and then there's this lovely soft spice coming through, but it's like a soft sweet spice. Again, this is slightly on the sweeter side. It's not a Booker's dry spice. This is much more kind of like sweet spice, but again, cinnamon, nutmeg, almost a citrusy note coming through as well. I think this is absolutely stunning. Again, so we're looking at what, 57.7%, but again, drinks brilliantly neat. This, in an old fashioned, you don't need a lot of syrup, but with added bitters and maybe just a little splash of like an orange liqueur or something like that, just to bring that fruitiness out. I do get a lot of kind of orange oil and almost orange blossom coming through. It's just incredible. It's an absolutely brilliant whiskey, and you're looking at about 110, 120 quid because it's single barrel and there's not a lot of it. And we are talking about a rye, a type of rye that has been really researched and grown specifically for this. But the amount of bourbon that's out there at the moment, and I'm talking bourbon in particular because we have this like premium bourbon category where it's just a load of brands bringing out stuff and they're pushing 100, 150 quid because that's where the market is at the moment. This is more than a match and better than a lot of them. I think this is absolutely fantastic. Absolutely love it. I'm still okay about the standard ragtime ryes. They have done a rebranding on this as well. So ragtime rye is now, I think it's just called Jaywalk rye, and the heirloom sits at the top of that range. The new bottlings look really good as well. I might see if I can maybe put a picture up because I think I didn't put it in the background info. But absolutely love this. This ticks so many boxes for me. Again, on the sweeter side. We've probably established already by now that is my type of thing. But I am so impressed with this, and this is definitely one that a lot of people will probably pass by, because if you're buying a bottle at that price point, you're probably going to look at the bigger names, but actually this is up there as one of the best, definitely. So let's look at the penultimate one of the box. So Old Elk is a brand that whenever I've gone over to the States, I've always had my eye on it, but I've never really had the chance to try them properly. And there is this whole thing about a lot of it is produced at MGP, and I will get onto that in that background information. I love the bottle, I love the stopper. I love this sort of wood effect, chunky stopper that's on here. When you take it out, it's almost like it feels like it's a bit too light. It feels like it should be a lot heavier, but it's a beautiful bottle. And they do lots of different sort of finishes as well. There's all sorts of finishes going on. But this particular one was a single barrel selection selected by the boss lady, and I will explain who the boss lady is in a second. But I bought this back from the US myself following a trip to Florida. It was 18 months ago now, so it wasn't, no, it was September of last year. So September 2024 was when I bought this particular one back, and I bought a couple of bottles back. I sold a couple of them. I had this one left, and I was like, no, this is going in a pack because I want more people to try this than just one person taking the bottle. So you are lucky to have this. This is a Tawny port finish wheat whiskey, which is unusual in itself. Let me explain why this one is particularly special right now.
Based in Fort Collins, Denver, Old Oak was founded in 2013 by Kurt Richardson, who also created Otterbox, a well-known brand of phone cases. The master distiller is Greg Metzer, who'd spent nearly 40 years working at the MGP distillery in Indiana. The vast majority of Old Elk whiskey is sourced from MGP, and while for many American whiskey drinkers this is seen as a cop-out and a slight against its quality, Kurt and the Old Elk team worked out an agreement with Greg to produce their own specific mash bill for distillate, as opposed to purchasing standard MGP stocks. Greg then left MGP in 2016 to oversee the new physical Old Elk distillery, although around 90% of Old Elk's whiskey stock still comes from MGP. This barrel pick was chosen by Marsha Wells and selected customers of her First Avenue liquor store based in St. Petersburg, Florida. I've become good friends with Marsha over the last few years, and she has done an amazing job building up a fantastic business operation, which now includes a new clubhouse bar specialising solely in North American whiskies, including exclusive barrel picks from a multitude of distilleries. The mash bill for this wheat whiskey contains 95% wheat and 5% malted barley, with primary aging taking place in a heavy char virgin oak barrel for 6 years, before transferring to a Tawny port pipe for 11 months, with bottling taking place at an ABV of 55.05% or 110.1 US proof. One of the advantages of having their own bar means the Tawny port cask that was used to finish this particular barrel pick sits half full in the First Avenue liquor store clubhouse, from which customers can then thieve a measure from when they visit. As such, the remaining liquid inside continues to evolve over time until it is finally emptied.
So for 3 years now, I've gone over to America as a business trip, in essence, for the business. Which is a nice bonus and pretty much a dream come true. Like, if I told my 14-year-old self, when you get older, Ben, you'll be able to go out to America on a business trip to go and buy American whiskies. Because at that age, I was already into whiskey, not necessarily drinking it, but, you know, collecting my dad. Okay. When I was 22, 23, and I was working at Oddbins and really getting into whiskey, you'd have told me then you'll be going out to America and picking up whiskies to bring back for yourself. It's not quite as glamorous as that, because I do have to put them into a suitcase and pray that they get over in one piece, and you've got to pay the duty and this and that and the other. It's a bit of a nightmare, but it does mean that I can get whiskies that aren't available in the UK officially. And when you then make friends pretty randomly, so I was doing a tour of distilleries 3 years ago with my wife Vicky. We were visiting a load of distilleries. We went to one called Kazuba & Sons in St. Petersburg. Really, really good distillery. Actually a family that had moved over from Poland, set up in Florida. Got on really well with them, spent a couple of hours with them. I was looking at importing things from Florida into the UK because Florida is essentially my second home. And there's a load of really, really good distilleries going on out there, and lots of really good American whiskies. And I was looking at importing, and I just cannot make it work. So if anybody's watching that deals with importing and can help me import alcohol particularly into the UK in bottle form, that's where it's as soon as you start talking about bottles of alcohol to importing companies, they just don't want to know. But there is an untapped market there, absolutely. Don't nick my idea, work with me. So we're there with, oh God, what was his name? Forgotten. Anyway, Matthias. And he says, there's a liquor store just around the corner, and I need to go and pick up some tequila. We're making tacos tonight, and I need a bottle of tequila, as you do. It was a Wednesday as well. So we follow him in the car down to this liquor store around the corner called First Avenue Liquors, and he introduces me to First Avenue Liquors. He introduces me to Marsha, the owner. We hit it off like that. She's absolutely amazing, like a whirlwind, a force of nature, but incredibly passionate. She's got 3 liquor stores. 2 of them are basically like in student areas, and she sells Fireball and Tito's and things like that. But what that does mean is that her liquor store, which is the First Avenue liquor store that you see in the pictures, that picture there, by the way, they've moved literally the other side of the building in between. They had to, but it means that they've now got the clubhouse at the back. That's the reason the bar is now there. So if you use that picture, if you're in St. Petersburg and you look at that picture and you go, that's where the liquor store should be, literally look next door but one, and that's where she is now. They just haven't got a picture of the new place yet. She incredibly passionate, and she was kind of like, she's got like barrel picks, and because of the Fireball and the bulk stuff that she's selling in her other shops, that then gives her allocations of the really good stuff, that she can then sell in like her baby, which is that shop there. So she can't get hold of Pappy like that. She can't get hold of Eagle Rare 17 and Double Eagle like that. It's exactly the same as it is over here. You've got to sell bucket loads of cheap stuff like Fireball in order to get on the list to get the allocations. So I go over there now once a year. We go over there for a week, Vicky and I. We go around various liquor stores, but we mainly go to hers. The last couple of times I've done a tasting with them. So I've done an English whiskey tasting and a new Scotch whiskey distillery tasting with them. We're going out there in July this year. I'm figuring out what to do for a tasting for them. The customers are absolutely amazing. It's really, really good fun. I get some stock off her, and then I also pick some bits and pieces up from elsewhere. And maybe I go to a Disney park or two as well. But it's a business trip. It's a very serious business trip. No fun allowed. But what it does mean is that I can pick stuff up from her at slightly better rates than if I was just going to a regular liquor store. But it also means that I can take requests. So now that I know that I'm going again, I am taking requests from customers that are looking for specific bottles. And she can give me a price for them, or I can find out what the price is, and I can then go back to that customer and say, right, it is going to cost you X amount because it's going to cost me this much to purchase it. I've got the duty to pay, I've got the VAT to pay, I need to put margin on it because I'm a business and I've got kids to feed. And there's also the fact that I've had to pay for a flight, and I've got cases, and I've got car hire, and I've got this and that and the other. So I've got to cover all those costs as well. Otherwise, what is the point of me going? Is that price reasonable for something that you cannot get in the UK anyway? If they turn around and go, no, it's too much, I just don't get it, I'll pick up something else. And I tend to go and pick up more unusual things like this, like that, like the next one that we've got, or just things that I know you can't get over here, and I'll be trying stuff. A lot of liquor stores will let you try stuff, so I'll be trying different things and going, yeah, that one's really good, can you do me a deal, whatever, that sort of thing, because if everything else that I've got to add on really does put the price up over on this, but you've got to cover your costs somehow. Anyway, regardless, rant over. This particular one, I love the fact that she's got the cask still sat in the bar, and that's when I tried it. So I didn't try it out of the bottle, I tried it out of the cask. So it has evolved slightly to what's in here, but this is still really bloody good, because obviously I've tried this having made the packs. That Tawny port element is phenomenal. The fact that you can thieve a measure from yourself and it's still changing in the cask itself is brilliant. Never seen that anywhere else. There'll be bars doing it, but the fact that she's doing it there is, I think, absolutely stunning and very reasonably priced. The Tawny port element's fantastic. That wheat element really does work. I think if it was very corn heavy, the sweetness with the nuttiness of the Tawny would be a little bit unbalanced. But because wheat tends to give you a slightly higher flavour profile, it allows that slightly nutty, slightly drying, like almost like cranberries, like eating raw cranberries. So you get that kind of tart dryness coming through as a finish almost. It allows that to absolutely shine through. It is amazing. I love this. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Really unusual, an unusual finish. I think Old Elk are, and I've tried a few others now, consistently brilliant, even if they are MGP. A lot of people turn their nose up at places from MGP. I actually prefer places that say, yeah, we're sourcing it from MGP, but we believe it's really good and this is why, and you taste it and you go, yeah, this is brilliant. You picked an absolute belter, well done. It's the ones that turn around and say, oh, it's an American whiskey, but I can't divulge in where it's from, because your natural instinct is, well, it's MGP. And if you're not going to say it's from MGP, it makes me believe that you're not really paying much attention or you're trying to hide something. This, they're open and honest about it. Marsha, like me, has a bit of a sweet tooth, and therefore I tend to err towards her single barrel picks. There's a lot of single barrel picks in the US. It's something we don't really do in the UK, even with like Scotch whiskies and things like that. And particularly with retail, there are some, but it's not a bigger thing as it is in America. There's barrel picks all over the place in these liquor stores, and some of them are bloody awful. And it really is a case of we just want a barrel pick with our name on it. And we took the first one that was available. But Marsha, she's got a select number of customers that they tend to go with. She does have a sweeter tooth, so she does err on the slightly sweeter side, but every single one of her barrel picks so far have been absolute belters. She's got a Four Roses one coming out. She literally posted this morning on Facebook. They've selected a Four Roses one, and I'm hoping by the time I go out there in July, it's March now, that will be ready and I can bring some of that back with me. I'm very tempted to do, if they've got enough stock and I can get enough, to do a sample pack where it's going to be Marsh's barrel picks, because that will be absolutely amazing. So, enough about Old Elk. Let's go on to the 6th and final sample. So rye, I'm calling it Rye 3. I don't know if it's just rye, but I think calling your company or your brand rye and then going, have you got the rye whiskey, isn't really doing yourself any favours. So I'm assuming this is Rye 3. And there is a bit of a convoluted story about 3, which I've not gone into because it's a little bit marketing bump. I think it's just one of those where it looks different, it kind of stands out. Fairly unassuming bottle. And again, this is a barrel pick from Marsha at First Avenue. But the thing that really caught my eye was that 16 years. You don't often get age statements on American whiskies generally. You very rarely get anything that high. We've obviously had, more than 16 in the Four Roses, but it's not really a thing. So I was already intrigued, and then I tried it at the bar, and it was absolutely not what I was expecting. So I was like, yes, I've got to get some of these back into the UK. Again, brought a couple of bottles back with me, sold a couple, kept this one, went, no, I want more people to try this, because not everybody is going to look at this. Particularly light whiskey, what does that mean as well? Good age, but what's a light whiskey? Oh, this seems a bit odd, not too sure about this. So this is going to give more people an opportunity to try what I think is one of the most interesting, unusual, but not in a crazy way, but just a really different style of whiskey and a flavour profile that this is unlike anything else I've had before, and that's always a really, really good thing. Before I get into why I think this is really interesting, let me just give you the background information about Rye 3, company who owns Rye 3, the guy who set it up, and then also, what is light whiskey? What even is that?
Launched in late 2020, Rye 3 Whiskey, which is how I think we're supposed to be pronouncing it, is the brand name for Virginia Beach-based Phenomenal Spirits, who also release Ron Isalco rums under the oversight of master blender Matt Witzig. The company was founded in 2017 by Karthik Sudhir, a tech entrepreneur from India who wanted to produce a premium range of spirits and also highlight the historical influence of rye in American whiskey making. Whiskey for Rye 3 bottlings are sourced from a variety of distilleries across both the US and Canada. And while sourced whiskies can be a bone of contention for some people, if you get it right, you can release some amazing bottles. Now, the term light whiskey has no connection to flavour or even calorie content, like light beers, but a higher ABV than normal at the time of distillation, and is a category introduced to the American market around the 1970s. Whereas under US regulation, bourbon and rye spirits must be distilled to no higher than 160 proof, or 80% ABV, light whiskey is determined as that which has been distilled above 80% but no more than 95% ABV. Likewise, whereas the legal limit of entry proof into the barrel for bourbon and rye is 125 US proof, or 62.5% ABV, a light whiskey can enter the barrel at a much higher strength. This enables the spirit to pick up more flavours from more unusual casks, making it more versatile when looking at cask finishing. However, it never really took off in popularity in the 70s with consumers, and has only recently become more prevalent to the market due to that versatility. This particular release is another superb barrel pick from Marsha Wells at First Avenue Liquors in St. Petersburg, Florida. The mash bill features 99% corn and 1% malted barley, with a considerable age statement of 16 years, and it's thought the spirit originates from the MGP distillery in Indiana. Even with the length of time spent in cask, this one single barrel was bottled at a considerable strength of 68.3% ABV, or 136.6 US proof.
So, light whiskey. Probably, I think part of the problem with light whiskey is the words light whiskey. I think a lot of people will see the word light and think it means flavour. Again, calories, something like that. Colour, I don't know. But it's not a great term for what is admittedly a very technical description of this is higher proof in the still, higher proof going into the barrel. So it doesn't really do it any favours, but I can't think of another term. It's not like you can say overproof, because you've got overproof rum, which is just, it's higher ABV. What's fascinating about this is 68.3%. This is the strongest in the box by far. One of the highest proof whiskies I've come across. And yet, on its own, without water, there's barely any heat. There's loads of flavour. There's loads of fruit coming through. I get like orange cream and cream soda and this sweetness coming through. And as I've already said, Marcia has a sweet tooth, so do I. This is very, very sweet. And you know, if you thought the Blanton's was sweet and it's too sweet for you, this is probably going to be too sweet for you. But considering the age, the complexity is incredible. And considering the ABV, the balance of flavours, the lightness of it, and I say that somewhat reluctantly because I don't want the implication to be it's a light whiskey so it's light in flavour. But the lightness of that complexity, there is still loads going on in here, is just unbelievable. This is, I think, absolutely stunning. You look at that ABV and you think this is going to be fire water. And you look at light whiskey at 68%, this is basically nets. No. Total opposite. It's absolutely incredible stuff. And I don't think the bottle really does it any favours. And that's why I wanted to put it in this pack, because I think the more people that try this, the more people will be going, oh wow, this is totally different, and absolutely fascinating. And this is, on fairly good authority, this is MGP stock. This is not what people associate MGP with. A lot of people will talk about flavours of dill coming through MGP whiskies. Don't get any dill in that. This is just like bags of citrus fruit, this soft kind of like creaminess coming through. It's absolutely brilliant and unlike anything else that I've had before, and I love it because of it. So that is the pack. I hope that you enjoyed all of them, if not most of them. It was great fun putting them together. I hope the information was okay for you. Like I say, there is a trip planned for July. It's my wife's 45th birthday, but as part of that trip we are also going to be going to Marcia's, and I'm going to see what bottles I'm going to pick up. So if you are interested in, if there's anything that you particularly want in the States that you want me to look for, if you give me enough time before I go, I can go and get the prices and figure out how much it's going to be once it's come back for you to purchase. If that works for you, I know I've got something to go and look for. I will let you know that I've got it when I'm out there as soon as it comes back, and I know it's in one piece from it, because this is a suitcase with air sac bags in. This is not like officially sent over on UPS or anything like that. This is me putting bottles in air sac bags in a suitcase on the plane. I pay the duty and everything up front, and then if it smashes on the way, I'm out of pocket. But I pay all the relevant costs and everything up front before we come home, just so that I don't have to go through the red channel because it's already paid for and cleared off and everything like that. That just saves me time. Boxes are ticked, everything's paid for, everything's above board. I've got custom stamps to put on it, so everything is legal. This is not like a dodgy, oh, I'm going to bring a couple of bottles back in the duffel bag. This is legit because I'm covering everything so that I'm not getting done for it, but it means that you can get a bottle officially, not through dodgy channels. So I can give you the price, I can tell you how much it's going to be, and then you can go, yes, actually I'll have it, or sorry, that's too expensive. That's fine, I get it, because there are extra costs to be put on, and it might be $40 in America, but it's not £40 once I've converted and paid duty and this and the cover does that and put a margin on, because I'm a business, I do need to make money as well. I'm not going to take the piss, but I'm not going to give it away for free and make a loss on it. Anyway, so if that's the case, send me an email, ben@spiritspecialist.com. It's going to go on the screen now. Or join the mailing list, www.spiritspecialist.com. That has the full range. Again, UK shipping is available. The packs, doing this, I've sold a couple of these already, but you know, if you're watching this and you've not got a pack and you think, oh, that sounds nice, head on to the website and see if there's any left. Hopefully, once we come back from America in July, I'll have another pack of something interesting, because I quite like putting these packs together. The reason the Some Like It Hot pack was put together was 3 of those: the Jack Daniels, the Watkins, and the Fireball Dragon Reserve. Oh no, 4 of these in fact. The Big Hot Cinema Whiskey. 4 of that pack aren't available in the UK. They're only available in the US. I'm quite tempted to do a flavoured whiskey pack as well, or tasting event. In terms of tasting events, keep an eye on the events page, or if you're on the mailing list, I will give everybody a heads up, because the next tasting I'm doing is Lockley, but I've got a few in-person ones, and then some other interesting things going through the year. But thank you for taking part. Thank you for buying the pack. It's really appreciated. If you've got any feedback, any thoughts, I'd love to know your thoughts on these individual ones, particularly this one. I'd love to know what people think of this. Is it just me that thinks this is amazing, or is it actually very, very good? But if there's got any ideas of other packs that you'd like me to put together, or tasting events, or anything like that, do get in touch. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you at the next one. Cheers.